Hello, and welcome to a month that went by possibly the quickest of the year so far. It's wild to think that we finished it. Nevertheless, April is over, or will be tomorrow at the time of filming this, and as always, then there's the obligatory monthly wrap up to see how we're doing. I feel like stats wise, this is going to look like a disappointing month in terms of what I gave myself as what I wanted to do at the start of the year. But when I have the stack of books that I read, really happy with what I actually read. This may be my favourite month of the year in terms of what I fit in. In the comments, let me know what you read, see whether we match up on anything. I feel like I'm reading a couple of things that people may have read. How did your month go? Tell me in there now. The first thing is that I read a lot of books again. It's not surprising. I feel like I started this year and it felt like it was going to be a an anomaly to read as much as I did, and then I've just kind of maintained it. I don't know what's happening. I'm doing all right. Subject matter wise, evidently, with the almost a quarter of the reads being dark, April was April showering on my mood apparently, with mysterious, tense, and adventurous as the other three main ones. So, mini depressive episode I wasn't aware of, maybe. But pace wise, for all you real fucking stats nerds, that it's the usual, just a whatever it is. Page number. Now here's the one. Here's the one that on the surface appears quite negative, because overwhelmingly we're in the under 300 page section. It's what we wanted to avoid. It's what we've been looking to avoid since we started the year. However, two of these are hardbacks, which I think if I had got them in paperback, which I usually would do, they'd be over 300 pages long. So I'm giving myself that, and who gives a shit? But we only read one book between the 300 and 500, and that was actually an audiobook. So exclusively, we've just read Chunkers or Small Boys. It was 100% fiction. I'm not even going to bother putting that stat on the screen. I read no non-fiction this month, because usually that's for audiobooks, and my audiobooks this month have not been, they've been all fiction. Genres. This one's a surprising one as well. I feel like this is not usually the case for me. We've got fantasy, usually is around the top with literary, but horror and science fiction being well and truly up there. And at the bottom, getting into a new form of literature or format. I read one digital, one audio, and the rest is in print, typical for me, with an average rating of 3.88. Which is a pretty good month. I think I just read a lot, and as a result, it spread around a bit. I only had one 5-star for the entire month, but I had a lot of 4s. So yeah, looking at it, I'm still happy with this month. I'm actually very happy with this month, which is funny because an average rating of 3.88, you assume it's more progression wise. You'll know what I'm saying, but progression wise, when you look through the books I actually read, I think I did a good job. So now we'll actually go through into the actual books I read. So the first one was an arc, and it was 19 Claws and a Blackbird by Augustina Bazterrica, which is the author who wrote Tender as the Flesh, which I read earlier in the year. Thoroughly enjoyed that. It really worked for me. This series of short stories, I gave 2.25 stars. It was just below average for me. Like, I just found myself disconnected from almost all of the stories. I found myself like trying to think of what they were trying to say, and it was just a bit muddy, a bit messy, a bit confused. And I know this is a new translation, but an older collection. This came out in I think Argentina is where the author's from. It came out there before Tender as the Flesh. So it also does make sense that this would be of a weaker quality, because this is the short stories they were writing to progress, if you get what I mean. But I'm not going to go into it too much. Dark, very twisted short stories that personally I'd recommend Tender as the Flesh well before getting to this. 2.5 stars was my audiobook of the month, which was The Legend of Blackjack by A.R. Whittam, which was kindly given to me for the review purpose by the author. And I went with the audiobook because I was looking for an audiobook at the time. And yeah, it was a good experience. That's what I would say. For a young adult, fast-paced piece, It follows this kid who kind of follow a bit of his childhood, sets up the character, and then all of a sudden it's like a portal fantasy ends up in a completely different place, and it's an interesting sci-fi fantasy blend that had some very strong characters, very strong actual narrator as well. I was worried going into it that the audiobook narrator is the author, and I was like, oh, not sure how I feel about that in terms of, is that because he's a good narrator, or is that I don't want to pay for a narrator? Turns out the guy's just a very good audio book narrator. So he brought a lot of characters to everyone. He really fleshed out the action. It felt a very vibrant audiobook. It's funny that the book is structured in an almost episodic way, and so because it was coming from that avenue of an audiobook, I feel like because I didn't know that going in, I felt myself stunted throughout it, feeling like I should be getting to the end and I'm just not. And so that had an effect on my experience. Um, Next up is 3.25, which is a book that I do have here. This one I will not go into particulars on because there will be a review in a different video. You'll notice that a lot of these they're going to be in different videos, but because I'm currently doing my final submissions at university for the year, I just don't have the time to edit and everything. So I've recorded a lot, have a bunch of videos lined up, and I just haven't edited them. So, Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer was, when I did what series do people want me to read, this was one of the, I think in the top 5, and I've been really meaning to get to it, but the other 4 really came up first, like Books of Babel and that kind of thing. So now I can actually get to Annihilation. I have read it, I gave it 3.25 stars, go into it in a different video more. The idea is that you follow a protagonist who has gone into this place called Area X. It's this anomaly in the world where all the fauna and all the flora is mutating. It's all different, and the way that the author creates the mood and tone and the descriptions of these things definitely just makes you unsettled. And the interactions between characters, it's these different scientists going in, and the revelation of information and everything, the personal relations between characters really worked well. My only thing is that I feel like I'm a victim of hype with this. I'm a victim of having seen the film and a lot of people saying, "Whoa, just wait for the book." They could not even translate that to film because it's so fucking crazy. And I was reading it and I was like, I don't know whether I've just read some fucked mad shit, but I don't know. I was like, this is a real good book. I didn't get that sense of like overwhelmingness that some people describe with this book. So I feel like I'm a victim of hype. I'm going to continue with the trilogy because now that I have expectations, maybe that would change. I've seen some people say that the rest of the series sucks. I've seen some of the people say that the series just gets better and better. So just going to check it out and see for myself now with completely empty. The only thing I'm putting into it is my own previous thoughts from this. So hopefully that'll be a good experience. 3.75 I gave to another book that I've made a video reviewing, which we'll go into more. However, it was The Birthday Party by Laurent Mauvignier. This was longlisted for the Booker International Prize. It did not make it onto the shortlist, which is a shame. I thought it was actually a really good book. It is a chunker, 500 pages. It's a really slow-paced, tense thriller. It's about this really small hamlet that only has 4 residents, and the first 200 pages you get introduced to all these the 4 people that from their thoughts. It's a stream of consciousness between these different people. That's not the right phrase. However, it is fluid in terms of the consciousness of who we're following. We hear different thoughts and opinions, we learn about their background, etc. And then around 200 pages in, an event happens, something changes, and it's this idea that this man is surprising his wife with a birthday party, and when guests start arriving, it becomes one of the most tense things I've ever read in my entire life. There was a point where I almost put it down and didn't pick it back up, and then when I didn't want to put it down for the rest of the book. So 3.75, I think it does have slight pacing issues. I think the writing is very self-involved, laboriously long, run-on sentence. It's very self-involved writing, very self-indulgent. So if that isn't for you, run away. If it is for you, you'll definitely get something from it. We have 4 stars. Let's go in order. This we're gonna have a review for this because we've done all of them so far. I've recorded this review as well, and that is A Feast for Crows, the fourth Song of Ice and Fire book. Once again, really enjoyed it. The series is one of my favourites without a doubt. This is my least favourite of the series, and I go into it more why I didn't enjoy it as much in the dedicated review. But it's the fourth book. You're either into this or you're not, so I'm not going to go into it. 4 stars. Next up is one that has made it onto the shortlist of the Women's Prize, is Black Butterflies by Priscilla Morris. This is one of the debut novels that's made it onto the shortlist, and this follows in the 90s. If I just make sure, yeah, in the 90s we are in Sarajevo in Bosnia, and this is about the beginning of the Bosnian War. We're following a lecturer in fine art. We're following this lecturer of no, not fine art, just painting. They're a painter, and it's describing as their husband and mother leave to go to England at the start of the war because the mother's ill. We are left with the main character who's like, what's the point in leaving? It's going to be done soon. I'll look after everything, and then you can come back once mum's feeling better. And so instead, we end up in the beginnings of war, and the way it evolves from isolated small incidents, and the author the main character kind of disassociating from those events to it becoming directly involved with where they live and the people they interact with and their job and everything. It evolves and manifests, this war does, in such a realistic and completely terrifying way. I would absolutely recommend this. The only real issue I had is that it's written in present tense, and that created, I don't know, it just didn't quite work for me. I always prefer to past tense, and that is purely personal choice. So still, real good book. The Hod King will get a self-review and also appear in a different review as well. So I'm not going to go into this really at all. Hod King, third book in the Books of Babel series. Really enjoying the series. This had issues that made it less engaging than the second book for me from a writing standpoint. The characters and everything still completely on point. Love them so much. Everything about them. From a structural point of view and a writing point of view, that's where my hiccups came in how those decisions affected pacing. So if you don't think that will affect you at all, if you're like, I love characters, I love what's going to happen, I love the adventure, I love the different environments they're going to be involved with, then Books of Babel, without a doubt, is a series you should check out. If you're one of those people that notices how structure and writing, if you're affected by those things easily, like different structuring, different narrative choices, different narration changes. I don't know how to describe it. There's just a couple of things that really irked me in this book, and throughout the series, honestly, keeps it from being that 5-star perfection for me. And finally, for the 4 stars, is At Night All Blood is Black by David Diop. This won the Booker Prize, the International Booker Prize, back in 2021. This follows Alpha DA, who is a Senegalese, I believe it's Senegalese actually, yeah, Senegalese soldier fighting for France in the Great War. And at the start of the book, they're with their friend Mademba Diop in the no man's land, and their friend is dying. They're bleeding out. Their guts are coming out. It's horrifically told. They're in so much pain, and they're screaming to our main character to put them out of their misery, and our character cannot do that. And so what happens throughout the rest of the book is that is a kind of this character reflecting on what France wants them to be, what that situation has made them, how they reflect on that situation, how it affects them. There's very much a description, an alignment between sex and war in this book. It definitely describes a lot of war-related things in a sexual manner, and a lot of sexual things in a war manner, which clearly is a very clear metaphorical choice. Overall, I think this would very much benefit from a secondary read, because the tone of the book changes halfway through. The first half is very much focused on the brutality, and what you would expect at the end of a book traditionally is that ramp up to violence and pure unadulterated violence that takes place. and what would traditionally happen in the first half, where it focuses more on personal relations, and that happens in the second half. There's a radical shift in the second half that I think stunted me a while, and then as a result, when I realised that's where we're going, I got into it. So I think rereading it with that knowledge will make it a way more beneficial and enjoyable read. But definitely a 4-star read. Definitely understand why people love it so much. 4.25 star with Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. I've been wanting to read this for quite a while, and luckily I got the chance to get the signed copy from Broken Binding thanks to Grace's birthday present, and it did not disappoint. It's the story of a woman who her partner, her wife, is a deep sea explorer type thing, and something's happened where that person's returned and they're just not quite the same, and it is a very macabre horror but slow paced with comedic relief. It's a very good blend. It felt extremely British to me in terms of how emotions portrayed, how comedy is portrayed, how horror is portrayed, all of these things in a very subdued, slow-paced atmosphere that didn't stick to one atmosphere. It blended all of these different things really well. So I would absolutely recommend this. I don't want to give too much away in terms of the plot. That's really all I'd say, is that this person's returned and we're following the repercussions and the journey of how we got to this place. Slaps real hard. 100% recommend. Interested in reading the short story collection by the same author that came out before it. We've got 3 4.5s. First one, Mind of a Mind. That is the second book in the Patterness series by Octavia E. Butler. I read Wild Seed last year thanks to the Fonda Lee recommendations video, and so I've continued this, and I immediately bought the third book because this is one of the most innovative and interesting sci-fi and fantasy series I've ever read. It is unreal, the work that's done in this. Like, they're written out of order. Like, so this one came out, I think, before the first book. And so we kind of go from the ending place and work our way to the start. And so as a result, you've got these different relationships coming through, and all of these different environments. The fact that we go from, in Wild Seed, we span and we're going very much in the 19th century vibes, and then here we're in the 20th century. Like, we are well and truly in the modern era. So I'm very interested, at the time of the release, we're in the modern era. So I'm very interested in seeing where the third book goes, and how it goes from more fantasy into more science fiction. Thoroughly excited. This is a borderline. It's like an X-Men-esque story. We're dealing with mutations. We're dealing with all this stuff, but it's from the perspective of. I don't want to give anything away about the plot because that spoils the first book, because it was written without the knowledge that the first book was going to exist. But I would say that if you want to deal with very, very heavy topics, you're dealing with eugenics, you're dealing with racism, you're dealing with class, you're dealing with all kinds of power dynamics. In a fantasy sci-fi setting, urban fantasy at this point, when we move forward, I imagine we may get more into science fiction. Unputdownable, super quick reads, they're all about 200 pages, 100% recommend. Then I also read The Wilful Princess and the Piebald Prince by Robin Hobb, because tomorrow I will be starting the Rainwell Chronicles. Thoroughly excited. This story slapped. I talked about it in a different video, not going to go into it too much, but Robin Hobb, Queen of Fantasy. And the final 4.5 stars is that I read Uzumaki by Junji Ito. This is my first ever manga. I read the first Death Note a long time ago, and do plan on, I actually am going to continue reading that and read the whole thing. But this is my first complete manga that I've read. Uzumaki slapped so hard. It had some of the creepiest imagery and creepiest goddamn writing I've ever read. It's just this story about how this town is infected by this evil in the form of spirals, and it's about our one main character and a relation of theirs, relation as in partner, sorry, that may be weird to people that have read it, about their experience as this town is corrupted. Wonderful, 100% recommend. Some translation issues in terms of weird sentences, but that kind of fits the tone of being strange. There is only one part in this entire thing that I won't get into where it shifts so wildly away from what we've been doing and it becomes farcical in a sense, but that is then abandoned and it goes back to being perfection. So that's the reason it has to be 4.5. It's simply because there is a kind of chapter or two in this book that is just a bit, it's just a bit fucking shit compared to the absolute perfection that the rest of it is. So I loved it. I will be continuing to read more manga because I've really enjoyed that experience. And so finally, we reach the 5 star. 1 5 star. It's the shortest book of the month by far. It is Foster by Claire Keegan. I read small things like these at the start of the year, and as a result, I saw Jack Edwards, I think, say that this is, I think it was the only 5 star he'd given at the time of the year, and I can see why. This was real good. This is set in Ireland where our main character is this young girl. Her mother's pregnant, and so there's too many kids in the house, not enough food to go around, not enough money to go around. So they drop our main character off with a different couple who look after them for a while whilst they deal with the kind of birth of this kid. And as a result, the kid learns more about themselves, their parents, this new couple. It's just a really endearing and really lovely story that just Claire Keegan has a real ability to cram so much into so little that I would recommend you can read this in one sitting and it slaps real hard. There's a reason I gave it 5 stars. I thoroughly loved it. And I want to keep reading more Claire Keegan stuff because I think they're reprinting everything because of the success of small things like these. So when there's such cute covers as well, I love them. So yeah, that was my 1 5 star of the month. But I think you can see with the range we've got why I was so happy. We've read some nominees for rewards, we've read some award winners, we've read manga, we've continued with the series. We've done a lot. We've been there, we've done it. And so as a result, I think we're at the end. If you did enjoy, please do like, please do subscribe. I'm going to go watch the football. And as always, have a nice rest of your day.